Flames devour the skyline. The air burns. Screams rise from the streets of Nishapoa, a city once called the Crown of Persia. By nightfall it will begin. 750,000 people, men, women, children, even animals, all erased. The year is 1221. And what's happening here is not war, it's revenge. One era, one death. One man's fury turned into the most terrifying massacre you've never heard of. His name was Genghis Khan. To some, a unifier. To others, a monster. But the truth is far more human, and far more horrifying. This is the story of how a single act of defiance brought down an empire's wrath. The story of grief, loyalty, and the price of vengeance. If you think you know the Mongols, think again. Because history doesn't whisper their truth, it screams it. Like, subscribe, and stay with this story. You will not forget it. Before the fires of Nishapur, before the pyramids of skulls, there was a boy. His name was Temujin. He was not born a conqueror. He was born hungry. The Mongolian steppe where he opened his eyes was a vast ocean of grass and silence. In winter, the air froze solid. In summer, it shimmered with heat. There were no walls, no kings, no safety, only tribes at war with the wind and with each other. Life was a coin test each morning against the horizon. Temujin's father was a minor chief who dreamed of uniting the tribes. One night, rival clans offered him a feast and poisoned his drink. He died before the boy's eyes. The next morning, the family's allies turned their backs. His clan abandoned the widow and her children to starve. Temujin was 9 years old when he learned that loyalty, the thing his father had trusted most, could vanish overnight. He watched his mother dig roots from frozen ground, her fingers bleeding from the frost. His younger brothers cried for food. There were no friends, no tribe, no future, only the certainty that survival would demand something ruthless. He grew silent. He studied the patterns of the sky, the way storms built and broke. He saw that power came not from strength alone, but from control of hunger, of fear, of men. When his half-brother stole food from the family, Temujin took an arrow and ended his life. His mother called him a destroyer, a wolf, but the boy did not flinch. He had learned his first law: betrayal deserved only one sentence. From that moment, a new kind of leader began to take shape. One who would not beg for loyalty, he would build it, he would make it sacred. As a young man, Temujin gathered followers from shattered tribes. They came to him not for gold or bloodline, he had none. But because he promised something new, one else could, order in a world of chaos. Under his command, loyalty was rewarded and cowardice crushed. He gave his men protection, purpose, and a new kind of faith, not in gids, but in each other. They called themselves brothers, not subjects. He bound them with an oath that would echo through centuries: if you betray your word, you and all your blood will vanish. Out of this, he forged the Yasa, the great law. It forbade the killing of women and children among Mongols, punished theft, demanded mercy for travelers, and above all made disloyalty the greatest sin. It was simple, brutal, effective. It turned wandering tribes into a nation. In 1206, after years of battle and alliance, Temujin stood upon the plains of En. Around him, thousands of warriors knelt. The wind tore at their banners. When he was raised upon a white felt carpet, the world changed. They named him Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The title carried not just authority, but destiny. From that day, he was no longer a man of one tribe. He was the embodiment of every tribe's hunger for survival. Under his rule, the Mongols became the most disciplined army the world had ever seen. Each warrior rode with multiple horses, allowing them to cover impossible distances. They could ride for days without stopping, sleep in the saddle, shoot 12 arrows a minute at full gallop. They carried dried meat and milk. They did not need supply lines. They could vanish into the horizon and reappear hundreds of miles away. To their enemies, they seemed supernatural, an army of ghosts riding the wind. But Genghis Khan's genius was not only in war. He valued skill over birth, loyalty over blood. A slave who proved brave could rise to command 1,000 men. A noble who disobeyed could be executed in front of his soldiers. He created an empire based not in lineage but merit, centuries before Europe would dream of such an idea. To his people, he was law. To his enemies, he was the storm itself. By 1218, his empire reached the edge of the Khwarezmian Empire, ruled by Shah Muhammad, a man whose lands stretched across Persia, Afghanistan, and beyond. The Shah commanded millions. He sought out the crossroads of the Silk Road, master of wealth and cities so splendid they seemed eternal. Genghis Khan saw opportunity, knit conquest. He sent a message of friendship. 450 merchants rode west, carrying silk, gold, and his words of peace. I am the ruler of the lands of the rising sun. You are the ruler of the lands of the setting sun. Let there be peace between us. But peace is fragile when pride rules the heart. The Shah's governor in the city of Atra, a man named Inalchuk, saw the caravan and imagined spies. Or perhaps he simply wanted their riches. He arrested the merchants, killed them all, and stole their treasures. When Genghis Khan heard the news, he sent 3 ambassadors demanding justice. The Shah answered by killing one and shaving the beards of the others, a humiliation worse than death in Mongol culture. The message was clear: there would be no peace. Genghis Khan didn't rage, he planned. He summoned his generals. 200,000 riders gathered under his banners. The thunder of hooves rolled across the steppes like the sound of approaching judgment. The man who had once been an outcast boy now commanded the greatest military force the world had ever known. And he would teach the Shah what it meant to break faith with the sons of the steppe. When the storm finally moved west, it was not an army. It was a living organism made of men and horses, of breath and thunder, of silence and death. The Mongols moved as one body, each soldier a cell within a greater will. They crossed deserts that others feared, mountains that others thought impossible. They carried no baggage, no hesitation. The world in that path simply stopped existing. The campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire was not to war in the way men of the West understood war. It was extermination delivered with method. The Mongols did not rush. They studied their enemy. They mapped the stars, the rivers, the grain stores. They used spies, merchants, and deserters. They learned how their opponents thought, and then they broke that pattern. Cities that surrendered were spared and absorbed into the empire. Those that resisted were erased, their names forgotten within a single generation. At the heart of this destruction rode Genghis Khan, calm, deliberate, almost detached. His commanders were chosen for loyalty, knit blood. His generals included Muslims, Chinese, and Turks. He was ruthless but knit blind. He understood the value of fear, how it could travel faster than any army. Refugees from conquered cities were forced to flee toward the next target, carrying stories of horror that would paralyze resistance before the first arrow was loosed. When the capital of the Shah's empire, Samarkand, fell in just 5 days, its people learned that walls were useless against wind. Bukhara, one of Islam's holiest cities, was burned to ash. In its great mosque, Genghis Khan stood up in the pulpit and said to the terrified crowd, "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His words carried across the centuries. Among his closest commanders was Tukwacha, called the Arrow. He was young, fearless, and utterly devoted to the Khan. More than that, he was family, married to one of Genghis Khan's daughters, a woman of strength and intelligence, whose name the chronicles never recorded. Together they symbolized the Khan's belief that loyalty was stronger than blood, and that the family of faith and discipline would outlast any tribe. By 1220, the empire stretched farther than the horizon. The Khwarezmian Empire, once powerful and proud, was collapsing. The Shah fled west into the mountains, pursued by Mongol detachments that moved faster than rumor. But in his retreat lay one last city, one jewel still gleaming in the Persian sun: Nishapur. It was a city of light, a place where merchants and scholars walked the same streets, where astronomers studied the stars from domed observatories, where poets wrote verses that would outlive kings. It had stood for centuries as a center of learning and art. Its people had heard of the Mongols, but they believed that their surrender would protect them. Tekwacha was sent to take the city. The siege was brief. The people opened their gates, offered tribute, and bowed before the Mongol banners. The general spared them. He left a small garrison to maintain order on Road N, confident that peace had been secured. But peace, like life, was fragile under empire. Months passed. Genghis Khan chased the fleeing Shah across mountains and deserts. Rumors began to spread across Persia that the great conqueror had been defeated. The citizens of Nishapur, encouraged by local nobles and exiled soldiers, began to believe those rumors. They told themselves that the Mongols were mortal, that they Gids had abandoned them. Rebellion bloomed like wildfire. The people of Nishipoa killed the Mongol garrison. They dragged their biddies through the streets. The air filled with the sound of celebration, if freedom reclaimed. From the city walls, archers watched the empty horizon and felt brave for the first time in months. And then, fate intervened. A single arrow, loosed by Han's lust to history, flew from the battlements. It found a gap in Tukwach armor as he returned to restore order. The shaft struck his chest. The man known as the arrow fell from his horse. He tried to rise, to draw breath, to give command, but blood filled his mouth. The dust of Nishipoa darkened beneath him. Within moments, the general was dead. When word reached Genghis Khan, he didn't shout. He didn't curse. He said nothing at all. Witnesses described his silence as heavier than anger. He sat still for a long time. Then he spoke one sentence that would erase a city. Erase it from the earth. The order passed through the ranks like a whisper from Gid. To his generals, it was more than vengeance, it was law. In the world of the Mongols, betrayal of the Khan's family was not merely rebellion, it was blasphemy. The punishment would be complete annihilation. In the spring of 1221, the Khan's youngest son, Tulyui, rode toward Nishipoa with a host of warriors. Beside him rode Tukucha's widow, the Khan's own daughter. She had demanded the right to witness the city's destruction herself. To her, this was no campaign. It was a funeral. The Mongols surrounded Nishipoa in silence. No messenger was sent. No terms of surrender were offered. The people watched from their walls, waiting for demands that never came. They saw the riders lining the horizon, thousands upon thousands of them, their armor glinting beneath the sun. And still, no one spoke. At dawn, the first horn sounded. The siege had begun. The dawn that broke over Nishipoa was thin and gray, a hesitant light that revealed the outlines of the Mongol army surrounding the city. From the walls, the citizens could see them clearly for the first time, an ocean of riders stretching from one horizon to the other, unmoving, silent, as if coved from the earth itself. The sight stole breath from the living. The people prayed in whispers, their voices trembling as the wind carried dust through the gates that would soon fall. Inside the Mongol camp, Genghis Khan's daughter sat beside her brother Tulyui. She was veiled, her face unreadable. In her hands she held a small piece of cloth, embroidered with her husband's name. It was all that remained of Tukwach. For days she had said little, but her silence carried the weight of command. She had come not only to witness the destruction of Nishipoa, but to ensure that no soul within it would live to remember her grief. When the sun reached its highest point, the Mongol horns sounded. The earth seemed to shudder beneath the first charge. Waves of riders thundered toward the walls. Arrows filled the air, blackening the sky. The defenders answered with catapults on stones, their cries echoing against the mountains. But the Mongols were patient. They had studied the city's defenses. They had brought engineers, ladders, and siege towers taken from the cities of the east. They advanced without hesitation, step by step, hour by hour, until the outer gates splintered beneath their weight. For 4 days, the siege consumed Nishipoa. The people fought with desperation, knowing what awaited them if they failed. Every alley became a battlefield, every rooftop a final stand. Smoke choked the air, the streets were slick with blood. When the last gate fell, the Mongols pawed through like water through a broken dam. The killing began. The order was simple: leave nothing alive. Men, women, children, animals, none would be spared. It was net rage. It was duty. The soldiers moved with mechanical precision, the faces expressionless. Each man had been assigned a number, 400 souls to kill. They worked in silence, blade after blade, hour after hour, until the city's cries began to blur into one continuous sound, the voice of humanity breaking. Mothers clutched their infants as soldiers dragged them away. Fathers threw themselves into the flames rather than be taken. Scholars tried to burn their libraries before the invaders reached them, their manuscripts curling to ash in the firelight. In the marketplace, the blood ran ankle deep, mixing with the spilled spices on silks that had once made Nishipoa wealthy. The Mongol princess watched from a hill outside the walls. The wind carried the scent of smoke and iron. She said nothing as her husband's killers perished by the thousands. When an officer approached to ask whether the slaughter should stop, she looked toward the city and spoke her first words since arriving. "Knit until every living thing is gin." The soldiers obeyed. They moved through the ruins methodically, searching for anyone who had escaped. They found families hiding in cellars, priests praying in temples, children buried beneath the biddies of their parents. They killed them all. When night fell, the glow of the fires could be seen for miles. The sky itself seemed to burn. In the third day, the Mongols returned to the work, not to kill, but to ensure that death was complete. They decapitated the corpses and stacked the skulls into 3 pyramids outside the city, one for men, one for women, one for children. Each skull was placed carefully, as though part of a ceremony. The towers rose higher than the city walls. When the task was done, the soldiers stepped back and looked at their work in silence. There was nothing left to say. The princess sat in a wooden throne among the ruins, watching until the final wall collapsed. Her veil flooded in the smoke. The ground beneath her was warm from the fires. Some said she smiled, others said she wept. The chronicles do not agree. They only record that when she finally turned away, she whispered a single word: enough. But it was not enough. The destruction had only begun. The Mongols tore down every building, stone by stone. They filled the wells with biddies so that no one could drink from them again. They destroyed the irrigation channels that carried water from the mountains, ensuring that the land itself would die. When the work was done, the fields were sown with salt. Where once there had been gardens and palaces, there was only ash. The Mongols left nothing that could grow again. Nishipoa ceased to exist. Maps would later mark its place as waste ground. The wind that blew across its ruins carried not the scent of roses, but the dry breath of death. Travelers who passed through the plain at dusk said they heard whispers in the dust, the echo of prayers that had never been answered. By the time the army rode away, even the memory of the city seemed to fade. Only the skull pyramids remained, white against the desert, gleaming like monuments to a wrath beyond comprehension. Those who saw them and lived would carry the tale across continents. It would reach Baghdad, Damascus, even the far cities of Europe. It would make men tremble at the thought of defiance. The Khan's daughter returned to her father's cot. No one recorded what she said to him. No one asked. To the Mongols, the vengeance was complete, the law fulfilled. To the world, a civilization had been wiped away. The silence that followed was worse than the screams that had come before. It was the silence of the earth after a storm, a stillness so deep it seemed eternal. In that silence, the age of Nishapur ended, and the legend of the Mongol terror began. Word of the massacre spread like smoke across the world. Cities surrendered before the Mongols even arrived. Nishapur became legend. Resist the Khan, and you will become him, silent, buried, forgotten. Some say this terror saved lives. That one city's death spared many others, but others see it differently. The man who had united the tribes to end Case had become Case itself, a force that knew no limits. A storm that devoured everything it touched. He once said that the greatest pleasure in life was to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. To him, vengeance was balance. But the massacre at Nishapur revealed the truth: vengeance never balances, it only multiplies. Centuries later, archaeologists still find the bones beneath the Iranian soil, layers of ash, fragments of pottery fused by fire. The past has not disappeared, it waits, silent, beneath our feet. Empires rise, empires fall, but the earth remembers. The ruins of Nishapur are still there, half buried beneath sand and silence. What happened here was more than history, it was a warning. That loyalty can become madness, that love can become destruction, that vengeance, once unleashed, consumes everything. If you believe history is only about kings and empires, listen closer. It is about choices. The winds made in rage, in pride, in grief. The winds that still shape our world. Because every age has its Nishipoa. Every power carries the seed of its own destruction. And every one of us, if pushed far enough, must ask what would we burn for love? What would we destroy for revenge? This is not just a story from the past. It is a mirror. And when you look into it, you may see more of yourself than you expect.